just want to go outside. Feel free for one moment of my life.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Colton Ogburn, and we need to talk about Silo Season 2. We're going to take a look back at this second season and discuss whether or not it holds up against the first. But there's also that twist ending to break down and explain. It revealed so much, yet simultaneously opened the door to even more questions about what the hell is really going on and why the silos even exist. And hey, while I have you, I wanted to let you know that we are covering every episode of another Apple TV Plus series, Severance Season 2. So be sure to check out our weekly coverage of that show as well as our Praise Cure shirt up on our merch store right now, ScreenCrushMerch.com. Now, some of my burning questions coming out of this season finale, yes, pun intended, are the following. What did Lucas tell Bernard? Did Bernard die at the end? What's really going on with the algorithm? And will Solo return? But before answering these questions, I should remind you, this series is actually based on a series of books, and I want to be clear that I have not read these books.
I don't read, Benedict.
There won't be any spoilers about what's likely to come next, and any speculation I offer is just that, speculation.
Just admit it, you can't read.
Okay, so I was actually a really big fan of the first season of this series. I love Rebecca Ferguson, and don't even get me started on my boy Tim Robbins, star of the greatest film of all time.
Everybody's innocent in here. Don't you know that?
So, like I said, Silo is based on a trilogy of novels written by Hugh Halley. The books are titled Wool, Shift, and Dust. Now, there was actually development on a Silo film back in 2012, but they never got it off the ground. Apple then secured the rights in 2021, and this series was born, and damn was it good. This show has something in common with other great shows on the air right now, like Severance and Squid Game, and that common theme that they share is that they are social commentaries on class warfare and dystopian futures becoming more and more of a reality. Severance and Squid Game do a great job at exploring these themes head on by telling stories that show the everyman being exploited by his master. The master, of course, being represented by greed and those at the top. And those shows demonstrate to us the actions that can lead to apocalyptic consequences. But what the Silo series does, as compared to those other shows, is we're actually seeing the consequences of that corrupt and rigged system. We're seeing a desolate wasteland, an apocalyptic future, a literal hell on earth. I mean, the Silo is literally a multi-level purgatory beneath the surface.
Welcome to hell.
Now, in shows like Squid Game and Severance, the higher-ups, aka the bad guys, act as if they are doing good and helping those in need. The people who run the Squid Games act like their Fatal Games are helping people out of poverty. And the executives at Lumen and Severance lie and act as if they are doing good for the world and their employees by essentially enacting a form of slave labor. Now, the same is true for the leaders of the Silo, being the ones at the top and acting as if they are helping people. But what Silo does different from those other two shows is that we are actually seeing these characters living in the aftermath of a mismanaged and corrupt system that collapsed society as they knew it. But more importantly, this series shows us not only our characters living in this wasteland of our own doing, but that they are doomed to repeat themselves again and again. They've learned nothing. The Silo literally has a class structure based on its levels. The more affluent and higher class residents live on the higher levels, while the working class folks that keep the Silo running down in mechanical are on the bottom floor, and they are viewed as lesser than by those at the top. All of these residents are living in a failed societal structure, one that likely fell victim to social unrest, gigantic wealth disparities, and of course, nuclear war. Now, despite these folks having survived a world-ending event, one we'll talk about here shortly, we are seeing them literally repeat the same mistakes of their ancestors that likely led to them being in these silos to begin with. The Silo residents' ignorance of the outside world is representing our tendency as humans and as a society to have super short news cycles of when something tragic happens, and then we just move on, forget about it, and it happens again and again and again because we don't learn from our mistakes. And what's funny about this whole situation and how it ties into class structure, this is just a theory of mine, but I think that the folks in the Silo, they would likely all be descendants of the more wealthy. I mean, think about it. If the world ended and there were only 50 underground silos for survivors to cram into, it'd probably be the rich and powerful, the elites, who would get first dibs on entry.
So what happened? Was it like a bomb or something?
Well, in that flashback scene in the finale, we see a journalist and a congressman meeting at a bar in DC, and there we hear them discuss a dirty bomb.
The dirty bomb is what I want wanted to talk to you about.
Now, remember, another thing that's tied into the theme of Silo is not only the class structure stuff, but there's also the misinformation type themes. Everyone is being lied to and no one really knows what is the truth. And the perfect way to represent that in our modern world is by having a character like a journalist versus a character like a US congressman. Both of these figures are supposed to be individuals who would tell people the truth. But in our modern political era, most people don't trust either of them. So anyway, in this scene, we see the return of the Duck Pez from season 1, implying that the journalist was one of the early Silo residents. Now, prior to entering the bar, we did see the congressman being scanned for radioactive material, and we can see this pamphlet that has a picture of these biohazard suits and text that reads the new normal. This scene really hits like one of those calm before the storm type flashbacks that you'd see in a zombie movie, or even like the mini flashback scenes we've gotten in The Walking Dead right before the shit hits the fan. And hey, since I mentioned Walking Dead, I'm a huge Walking Dead fan, you guys know this. Can I just mention a few things real quick? There were a lot of things in this season that reminded me of the Walking Dead season 1 finale, such as when Lucas whispers in Bernard's ear. That reminded me of Jenner whispering in Rick's ear. I mean, look at both of their faces. They've just learned something just that completely rocks their world, but we, the audience, don't know what it is. There's also the computer voice speaking over the intercom.
Judge Sims, you and your son must leave the vault.
Enhanced internal view.
There's the threat of a giant explosion, a fire that can wipe everyone out, and both of these are actually taking place in Georgia. We know this because if you look at the city skyline from season 1, that looks like Atlanta, Georgia, and there's actually this book from the first season that indicates that they are near Georgia. Now, while the silos are in Georgia, I do think it's significant that this scene is taking place in Washington, D.C., the power hub of the U.S., and what's interesting is how this parallels the silos themselves. There appears to be 50 silos plus one that controls all of the other silos, just like how there are 50 states plus Washington, D.C., which, well, controls the 50 states. The residents of the silo are living under a thumb. They're being lied to. They're being played against each other, just like the corruption we see taking place in Washington, D.C. In this season, we see higher-ups like Bernard use tactics like playing the silo residents against one another, tricking them into fighting one another, all for his benefit, something that we see done all too often in our capitalistic system here in the US. But those in charge, above even Bernard, have a failsafe in place that can kill all of the silo residents, the safeguard procedure.
That means they can kill us at any time they want.
Those in charge fear an uprising. They fear unionization. It is in their interest to create this literal divide within the silos because the elites who control the main silo and all of the other silos know that if the people are united, they could be easily overtaken. This is once again playing into the themes of class warfare and control that this story is leaning into. The algorithm not only represents the powerful who control every aspect of our lives, but it's also a great commentary on our current relationship with the advancements in AI and people's fears that AI will replace, well, people. We actually saw this happen in this final episode with the algorithm essentially replacing Bernard not only as the one in charge and the one with secrets, but in a meta sense, it replaced him as the show's antagonist. And in this moment, when Lucas whispers a secret in Bernard's ear, the look on Bernard's face looks to me like a man who has realized that he too has been being played this entire time. He is yet another pawn in the game. So whatever Lucas revealed to Bernard prompted him to suit up and go outside, and I loved how this is the moment that he and Juliet come face to face for the first time this season. It was in this same spot the two last parted ways in the season 1 finale. So seeing these two meet once again in the same spot, juxtaposed with the fact that it is now Bernard who is wanting to leave and Juliet who is wanting to come back in. It was just really well done. And I'm saying that as a guy who wasn't really crazy about this season having these two separate storylines and Juliet being away in the other silo the entire time. I personally wanted to see more Bernard v. Juliet this season, but I think it's clear that we are going to be getting more of that in season 3.
Are you sure? Looks to me like Bernard is done for.
Well, yeah, Bernard certainly had an arc this season that could be viewed as final, and we did see him and Juliet both go up in flames in those final moments of the episode. We know Juliet is likely safe because, well, she's the star, and she's wearing a fire uniform, but it's unclear if Bernard's suit will be able to protect him from the flames the same way as a fire suit. My inclination, however, is yes, he's alive. I don't see season 3 opening with his death. If you're gonna kill him, just do it in the finale. Show us. And I'll admit, I'm always down for more Tim Robbins, but I should also mention Steve Zahn, who was a standout this season, and yet another great example of the human condition that this show is trying to tell a story about. He perfectly portrayed the mania of a man left alone for years, giving us a commentary on how in our modern age, with things like social media, we feel more connected than ever, but also more alone than ever. This is demonstrated as well by the silos. There are all of these silos literally right next to one another, and most of them don't even know the other one exists. They all feel alone. And speaking of the human condition, I can't help but mention the fact that the spiral staircase in the silo, it is representative of a strand of DNA, which is what makes a human a human. Now, this commentary on social media also of course connects to the algorithm, the evil AI, keeping the silo dwellers isolated and in the dark, only revealing the info that it wants revealed, and keeping people in line with what it wants them to do. So, I love Solo, I thought he was a great addition to this series, and I hope to see him back next season. And guys, look, I personally preferred the first season of this show. I really enjoy, mystery, political thriller vibe mixed with science fiction, and season 1 really brought that. And I was hoping that this season would give us more answers to all of that setup that was done in season 1, but instead we just got a whole lot more questions and what to me at times felt kind of like treading water, and then yet another ending scene that left us saying, what? But I do hope these questions are all answered in a season 3, and fingers crossed that we can cover that season in full here on the channel. But anyway, I guess my overall critique is that I love mystery shows, especially when I genuinely have no idea what's going on, like in the first season of Silo, or in shows like Severance and Squid Game. But this season of Silo just, I don't know, it kind of insisted upon itself a smidge too much for my liking.
It insists upon itself, Lois.
What?
It insists upon itself.
What does that even mean?
But hey, it is still definitely one of the better shows on TV right now, and I would love to know your thoughts and theories on this second season down in the comments below. Or hey, you can at me on Twitter, you can find me on our Discord, link in the description below, whatever works for you. And if you're new here, please feel free to subscribe, smash that bell for alerts so you don't miss a thing. For ScreenCrush, I'm Colton Ogburn.